All right, hello. Hello, Furfare. This is Major Coyote. I am going to be running a panel here talking about role-playing. One of my favorite things to do, especially with the fandom, but with anything. We're going to go through some basic information, just first guide to how do I get involved with this, what kind of games do I want to play, who do I want to play it with, who do I find, or how do I find people to play with. It can be a daunting experience sometimes. Hi Mary, hi Pirate, Razzie, Sen. I hope this is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to talk about a lot of things here. And at the end, we're going to take some questions, some comments. I want to hear about your experiences with role-playing. I want to hear about, if you haven't gotten into role-playing yet, like, why not? If you want to. I mean, some people just don't want to. That's all fine. But if you have wanted to, but just haven't, like, let's talk about why not. What can we do to maybe make that a change? So, the name here we're calling Role-Playing 101, Characters to Campaigns. And try, like I said, to get through the basics, because there are a lot of options. Once you decide on what you want to do and how you want to do it, everything changes from there. But we can talk about how to get to that point, at least. So, first off, I think the music should be playing. I want to just give a shout right quick to Wolf and Raven. We've used some of their music off and on through the through different streams and things. I know Raz has done a amazing job with sourcing other music for the ad bumpers and things. Sounds great. The music we're hearing in the background is going to be this Wolf and Raven called Layer of the Dragon. I thought it fit pretty well here. And let me know if the audio levels are anything, but I think we should be good. All right, so first things first, like the first question that most people, especially people in the furry fandom, might ask themselves: I've already got a character. Why not? I mean, why not just go ahead and use that? Why not go ahead and use this character I've made and played, and go role playing with that? Good to go, right? Well, hang on there, Tiger. There's a lot to consider before you actually jump in and decide what character to use and when a character is good to use above another, or when it's better to start another new one. So first things first, the biggest question you want to ask yourself when starting a campaign, starting to look for a campaign, is the first thing: what do you want to experience? Because ultimately, role-playing is all about experiencing something that you are not able to experience in real life. Whether that's a fantasy setting, a completely different race, different gender, different cultures. It could be different time periods. You could try to experience classical literature through role-playing. You can do space operas, whatever. So the biggest question to ask first is, what are you looking for in this experience? And that will help to define how you move forward with everything. Now, obviously, this is not a one-person game. Like, there's in the world of live role-playing, there's no such thing as one player. You have to make this decision collaboratively. You have to work with the other people that are going to be role-playing with you to come up with something that fits what everybody is looking for out of the experience. Everybody needs to be on the same page with that. So if you have two people looking for entirely different things, it's going to cause problems. That doesn't mean that everybody has to agree on the exact direction of things, but if one person wants to play a 15th century pirate, and another person wants to play a pilot in Galactic Armada or something like that. That those two aren't going to mesh unless you come together and maybe you play Space Pirates, something like that. Now, next thing, a little bit like what I just touched on, is who are you going to be playing with? Now that's a big question. That's a kind of in-depth one because there are multiple ways to go at this, and especially these days scheduling is like the old joke is the biggest thing to end the biggest cause of death in D&D is scheduling. So when you set out to start a role-playing experience, especially if you want to spend time on a full campaign and not just a like a one-shot, like a one-night thing, or like a limited duration thing, think about who you want to play with and how you are going to mesh your schedules together. It needs to be a commitment. The thing that has cost the most campaigns for me has been when people just can't get together, and life happens, of course. But when people don't make time to get together and do, have the game, and things just kind of fizzle out and die. That's just never fun. Last thing is, why are you starting this roleplay? That's a bigger question than it might seem. Like I said earlier, what experience you, but also what's the end result of that? Why are you going into this? Are you just doing it to have fun with friends? Perfectly reasonable. Are you going through playing the game to, like, I've known some people that have maybe been having a hard time with their life, and they've decided that it would be good for them, kind of therapeutic, kind of cathartic, to play a very happy, like bubbly character and experience, have that experience in the game to help their mood in real life. Now, obviously, you don't want to let things bleed over too much into real life, but it can be a good way to deal with real world emotions by having a little bit of pretend. I don't know. People sometimes, obviously, I don't think this is a problem with furry fandom, but sometimes people look down on and say well, you're just playing a childish game and playing make believe. Why don't you just live in the real world? Why? Why is it wrong? It's not wrong to have a little fun, have a little imagination. Yeah. to be with friends. Yeah, I see, pirate. But yeah, beyond that, there could be times when you want to explore an idea, explore roles in society. You want to explore, different ways of coping with certain aspects of life through playing a fictional character. It's kind of like a safe zone to experiment. So that can be a very big help with role playing. It can be very therapeutic. Yeah, that's true. Every once in a while, Mary. Every once in a while. So, should I roleplay as my Fursona? The short answer to that is maybe, but maybe not. There's some things that we want to consider when you're kind of going into that, because it can be all right. It can be very fun. It can be very rewarding, but some things to think about. How does my Fursona fit with what I want to get out of this experience? So I think a lot of people that have established characters, especially Fursonas, they're so excited to play those characters, they don't really take a moment to think about, is this character right for the setting, for the experience, for why we are doing this? And that can cause problems. So you want to definitely make sure that you're not just going down that road because you think it would be cool, but make sure you are aware of how well it fits. Is this going to be something that actually works, or am I just wanting to play my character? Next is, how much history do your role-playing partners have with your Fursona? If you've had a character established for years and years and years, that can cause problems too. Because if your friends, the partners in this experience, if they already know certain things about you or your character, that can do one of two things. One, it can lock you into a role. which if you want to experience something new, it can make that difficult because your friends, your partners might not, or might have this preconceived notion from all of the experience before how you played that character of what you were going to do. So they might let that bleed over a little bit, even not really realizing it or not meaning to. Or two, if somebody has a lot of experience, it can make things. It can kind of just remove the mystique or the surprises from the thing, and that can make things less fun if they already know how you're going to respond, how you're going to act. It means that there aren't any surprises, and that can be tough. And yes, exactly, Mary. It has to establish has to mesh with the game lore. If you have a character that's radically different from the setting, and you try to, put them into this new setting, it can cause that dissonance, that just jarring nature of it, and take everybody out of the story. You don't want to do that. Let's go on to the next one. The biggest question: will it be, or will I be okay if something bad happens? Any role-playing game that you play, with a few exceptions, death is a part of the game. You're playing a living person. You're playing them usually in a very dangerous situation. So what happens if your character is injured or is killed? Are you going to be okay with that? Because in the end, if you have a character that you can't let die, or are afraid to do dangerous things with because you have that deep personal connection with, or if you just think that you will not handle it very well if that character has something unfortunate happen to them, that can also make things way more stressful in the game. That's a big caution there. Most people have personas they are extremely attached to. So always be sure, if you want to play that character, you can. Just be sure that you are aware and you're prepared for what might happen if something bad happens. You definitely have to have a sense of humor, Mary. Absolutely. All right, let's keep going. So let's say we've come to a conclusion. We want to play. What do we need? What do we need to get started here? So the first thing, the most obvious thing, you need friends. You need people to play with. Now, I think it works best to have a circle of friends that you can start, even if they've never played, you've never played. If you can find somebody that has some experience, is willing to kind of walk you through the first steps, I think starting, especially for your first few games, with people that you are comfortable with is a big deal. Because ultimately, even those of us that are very outgoing, which I am not naturally, I think a lot of us are a little more on the introverted side. If we don't know the people that we're talking to, that we're dealing with, it can be difficult to really put yourself out there for the role play, which in that point, you're kind of defeating the whole purpose, right? So having people that you are comfortable with is, in my opinion, one of the biggest things to starting your first experience with roleplay. Next, now sometimes that's not an option. Sometimes we can't. We just don't know people that are into roleplaying or D&D or any of the different RPG systems. That happens, especially during the pandemic. Right now, it's hard to get things. Hopefully, it looks like things are looking up. Hopefully, we can get back to in-person things relatively soon. But yeah, it happens. And to kind of break a second, Super here. Sometimes luck just isn't with the players. That is exactly right. Sometimes that die roll, sometimes it just comes up a 1. Yeah, I have a die here. This die is cursed. I hate this die. I don't know why I keep it. I should throw it away. But anytime I need this thing to roll, if I accidentally pick it up and roll it, it doesn't work for me. I don't know. I should just throw it away. But for some reason, I never do. But yeah, sometimes luck just isn't with you, and you just have to accept that as a part of the game. Maybe bad waiting. Maybe that's it. But anyway, back to the thing up here. Roll20 is a good resource for finding a group if you either can't or just don't have people around you that can do this sort of thing. Now, they have different options. You can search for specific games. You can look in their forums for people that are starting groups for different genres, different games, different play styles. And I would always recommend, if you are looking for a group this way, make sure you sit down and talk with them before you actually get involved in a game, and just feel out everybody's vibe, especially the person running the game, which either would usually be called the dungeon master or the game master, depending on the setting and the game itself. But always make time to talk to those people and get a feel for them before you actually get into role playing with them. If you sit down and you start talking to them and red flags go off, you just don't think that this is going to be the kind of group that you're into, don't. The worst thing is getting involved in a group and getting invested in a story, and then just not vibing with the group. So some groups work great together, some groups don't, and having a bad experience with the group is not great. Yeah. All right. Maybe I will, Max. Maybe I'll give you the die. All right. Next thing is dice, and this is kind of a maybe, because I love dice. I have these in my tray. I have a whole bag. Which anybody out there probably has heard of anybody out there with RPG experience probably has heard of the Crown Royal bag. But you don't necessarily need dice for every game. Some games don't use dice. Some games are more just textural, or something. Like there's one, I'm trying to think of the name of it, but it uses a Jenga tower. It's called Dread. It's pretty cool. Like every time you have to make a decision, you pull a block from the Jenga tower, and if it falls, something really bad happens. It's crazy. There are all kinds of different games out there with different rules, different ways to play them, but most of them do use some sort of dice. Like most of the D&D style games use a 20-sided die as the standard. You can buy packs that have most of the standard dice in them, like a 20-sided, 8-sided, 10-sided, 12-sided, and so on. Some games use special dice. Like this is a fate die that has, instead of numbers, has 2 pluses, 2 minuses, and 2 blanks. So you roll it, and if you get a plus, you add that to your score. If you get a minus, take it away, so on. But yeah. So dice is a maybe. Most games will need some sort of rolling implement, but anyway. And something to play. It's just a game to play. So really, honestly, there's very little that you need to go out and buy or do anything to actually start role-playing. I love having physical dice. Some people like playing with dice rollers on their phone or a computer that simulates a random number generator. Those people are wrong, and they should feel bad. Not really, but I like regular dice better. Anyway, something to play is the last thing that you need to kind of decide there. Once you have a group, ready, and you've decided what kind of experience you want, what you want to get out of the experience, the next thing you need to decide is just what game do you want to play. And that's going to largely be determined by what kind of experience you want with this. So everybody's heard of Dungeons and Dragons. It is the most popular it is the most popular game out there. It's been around for almost 50 years at this point. You've seen it in movies, video games. It's all over the place. It's a very fun game. It's not the only game. So Dungeons and Dragons, great. I love it. I love playing it. 5th edition is a great place to jump in for somebody that wants a new experience with Dungeons and Dragons, but it is not the only game out there, and I absolutely recommend that people take a look at the different options that are available, because D&D is great for some people. It's not going to be the best option for everybody. Some people like more options, a little more rules heavy. They go with Pathfinder or something like that. Sometimes some people just don't want the fantasy, or that style of fantasy. Let's take a look at some other options, just a few. There are so many different systems out there that we absolutely cannot talk about all of them today. But there are lots. So here are a few that kind of give alternate options to D&D. So say you want to stick with classic fantasy, but you want to do a little furry kind of thing there because it's us. Here's a game called Root, based on a book series called Might and Right. It's a little bit kind of a little bit of kind of a cartoony feel to the art and everything. But you can play as different woodland characters and critters as they do their thing. There's also a game called Mouse Guard, which is based on a graphic novel series called Mouse Guard. This is a little different in that it's a little like Root is, all the different animals are roughly the same size. Like some animals are better at things than other animals, kind of a class or race thing going on there. But you're all vaguely the same size as each other. It's like the same kind of variation as humans. But you're not like playing as a mouse versus a fox. Root is a board game as well, and you're right, it's not a book series, it's a board game series. My mistake. I was thinking about Mouse Guard. But Root is a board game as well. They did come out with a RPG based on the board game. I haven't played it yet, but I really want to. And Werewolf the Apocalypse, actually. Where is it? I have right here, Werewolf the Apocalypse. Oh, the art book. But anyway, back to this. Mouse Guard is a little bit different in that the animals are all obviously like the main characters. Like the main option is the mice, but you can play as other animals, and they are vaguely the size and shape of their real life counterparts. So if you want to play as a mouse going through a world populated by foxes and snakes and things like that, this is a very cool option for a little bit more of a realistic take on the whole furry RPG thing. How about something a little bit more futuristic? There we go. So Cyberpunk, especially having the 80s theme for the convention here. Cyberpunk, especially the earlier editions. This is 2nd edition, Cyberpunk 2020. It was based on like an 80s retro futurism. So like the 80s view of what 2020 would have been. And kind of like cyberware, different things like that. It's a fun game. Lots of options to play as a futuristic netrunner. Or you have things like Shadowrun, which blend fantasy and future. So Shadowrun is, you have elves and goblins and orcs and different fantasy races, but living in the teched up future, which is really interesting as well. And last one I wanted to touch on, this is a kind of a cool one that I think it was off of a Kickstarter. It's called Lancer. So those of you out there that like Mech Warrior and things like that, this is a mech-based future role-playing game. So it's pretty awesome. It also has kind of like a Borderlands vibe a little bit, like you're working for corporations and things. Borderlands or Outer Worlds. It's very cool. Yeah, BattleTech's good too. Yes, definitely. All right, and here's another. So we talked about fantasy. We talked about futurism. there's one segment that some people kind of gloss over, don't really pay attention to much because, fantasy and futuristic, that gets the focus on a lot of things. But there are some really awesome RPGs that are all about fantasy realism, like a magical realism or slice of life style things. It doesn't mean they don't have action or they don't have like monsters and things like. So the first one here is a game I haven't played, but I kind of want to. It's called Monster Hearts. It's a game about monster teenagers, and like the whole point of the game is that you play as a kind of a coming of age kind of thing as a teenager growing up as some various kind of monster like vampires, werewolves, zombies, and just interacting and dealing with other monster teens. It sounds really cool. The one thing that I've read about it too that sounded interesting. Apparently, it really deals with like the rule set is really good for dealing with interpersonal relationships, especially as teenagers, which is something that's not as focused on in a lot of games. So having that as an option is very cool. Very much like regular high school, Mary. Very much like regular high school if your your lab partner was a vampire. So, like that's the point of it. It's meant to be like heightened reality. It's reality, but if, which is cool, I think. And another one that I kind of stretches the definition here, but I think is a really fun system. It's called Monster of the Week. Monster of the Week is a rules light system, so there's not very many rules. There's enough to kind of keep you going. But the idea is that you use this as a collaborative storytelling system rather than like a D&D where everything's really rules based. This one is kind of based off of like Supernatural, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, that sort of thing, and it focuses mostly on normal people interacting with supernatural elements. There are a couple of character classes you can play that use like minor magic, or like there's one that's called the Chosen One, so you basically are Buffy. But the text of the game discourages you from all choosing those like there should be one special person in the group, one magic user, one chosen person. Like you don't want everybody to be superheroes in this sort of game. In fact, there's one class that I think is absolutely hilarious and fun to play. It's called I'm blanking. It's called like the Normie or something like that. But you just are a regular person. You're the Xander, if anybody's watched Buffy, and it's awesome. Yeah. So once we've figured out what we want to play, what kind of experience we want to have, what setting we want to play in, what game we want to play in, let's make a character. Let's talk about how we actually go about making that character and learning how to use that character. So obviously, we're not going to go through and talk about character creation specifically because that's going to be different for each game. And that anyway. The first thing you want to do, at least the first recommendation I have, is to cooperate with the other players. Now, that doesn't mean that you want to give them all of your secrets. You want to keep things. You don't want to. We want there to be surprises. But talk to your other players. Talk about what kind of character you want to play. How can you mesh that with other characters? How do they interact together? Especially if you want to play a game where the people know each other as they start, which I think is probably the easiest, especially for the new players, to have it so that your characters already know each other, are already comfortable with each other. But I always think it's a good idea to cooperate with your other players as you create the characters. Like I said, that doesn't mean that you tell them everything about your character. You want to keep certain things back. But have a plan for how these characters are going to interact together. Because if you have a party of player characters that absolutely can't stand each other, not a fun game. So next, so how do we get to know these characters? How do we get to know who they are, what they're about, and how to play them. Because the biggest kind of stumbling block, I think, for a lot of new players, especially as they start playing, is just not really understanding who this character is. Like, how do they react to certain situations? And that can lead to a lot of people, not really wanting to interact too much, not wanting to roleplay, because they just don't know how their character would interact, how they would respond. So one of the things I like to do, especially if I feel a little, unsure of how my character would respond to a situation, is just to make a game of it. Talk to the other characters, have a little interaction. It doesn't have to be like story-based canon or anything like that, but play 20 questions with the other characters. Play games like Never Have I Ever, just to kind of get a feel for how your character would act. With this, the big thing to kind of keep in mind there is just to go with your gut. Like, use what you feel immediately, and go with it. Run with it. Improvise. You don't want to sit down. You don't want to try to plan out every single thing, because it's not organic. So just have an idea, have an outline of what your character should be like, and then just play some games. You can do it with other characters, or you can just do it yourself. Like, you can find a survey online of a personality survey, and just go through and just use your gut. How do you think you're use the first thing that comes to your mind that fits with this concept that you have, and flesh out how they would respond in many different situations. That'll give you an idea who that character is, how they would interact with the world around them. Yeah. Some recommendations about that: have flaws. Don't make your character. I don't know if I might be showing myself here a little bit, but I don't know if there are any Star Trek Next Generation fans out there. But I love Will Wheaton. I cannot stand Wesley Crusher. That character had no flaw. He was perfect. He could do anything at any point, and it was awful. No offense to Will Wheaton or anybody that really likes that character, but people don't like characters that don't struggle. So have flaws, have problems, have ways that your character is not perfect. Yeah, absolutely, Razzie. He was always the most hated character. Yeah. So you want to have a real person when you're as close to a real person without them actually having flesh and bone life. You want to have a well thought out character that has flaws, has issues, and has to deal with those things. Because having them have all the answers all the time, be the perfect golden child, is not fun. It's not fun for you. It's not fun for anyone. Have flaws. Remember, you are not the star of the show. I think this is one thing that needs to be said, especially to veterans and to newbies alike. Remember that your character is just one part of the cast. You have 3, 4, maybe more characters that are playing in the same game with you. You are not the star. Sometimes you have the spotlight, and that's great. It feels awesome. That spotlight needs to go to somebody else sometimes. Let it. Don't fight it. You're not the star. You're a part of an ensemble. So, in my opinion, the best TV shows are the ones where the ensemble works together and nobody is really the star of the show. Everybody is the star in their own way. So just remember, you are not the main character in this game. Not everything is going to go your way. Like we said earlier, sometimes luck just doesn't happen. Not everything's going to go your way. Not everything's going to turn out well for you all the time. And not everything is going to be focused on you. And I don't mean that to sound accusatory, but just keep that in mind. Sometimes it's hard. You are the main character in your own story all the time. It's hard to kind of step back and think, wait, this doesn't have to be about me. Let's do something else. Anyway, let's keep going. One thing also that I see a lot of people, again, veterans and newbies alike, having trouble with is really overdoing their backstory. And now, this has a caveat, because sometimes you just have to. There are certain situations, certain games, where a very fleshed out backstory is a very good thing, is necessary. Especially, I think, in, we'll talk about it in a second, but forum RPGs and like parlor games where you're not really rolling, you're more just interacting with other characters and doing things. Having a very well-developed backstory is, essential. For most games, though, you don't really want to overdo it. You want to have an idea where they came from. You want to have an idea where they came from and who they are. But if you try to write out everything that happened to them up to this point, you're going to write yourself into a corner where you don't really have as much room to grow. You don't have as much room to go from that point. So there's a benefit to leaving some of it to kind of come up with on the spot and develop your character as you play. And in general, I feel like sometimes, some people come in with this backstory about how you're this awesome, legendary fighter, and you're level 1. It's just like, that feels weird. I was the hero of my entire kingdom. I'm level 1, I got owned by a cat. Anyway, let's keep going. So, it comes down to it, I still want to play as my Fursona. Is that alright? Absolutely. Like, it is perfectly fine if you have considered all this. It fits with the setting. It fits with what you want to do. It fits with your group. You're not. If you want to play as your Fursona and everything else, all the boxes are checked. Good, go for it. Just as long as you keep everything else in mind. So this is it's kind of an example, I suppose. This is something that I have done. This is my character. This is I go by Major in the furry fandom. This is the character Kadir. I kind of have, it's the same Sona, but 2 different versions. And I kind of use that to keep a distance between the 2. That's something you can do if you want to play your Fursona, but you don't really want to have them be tied to what you understand as your main Fursona. You want to keep a separation between the character and the Fursona. So there are lots of differences between how I play Kadir here and how I interact as Major. And that's something that you can do. So how do we actually play? How do we actually go about doing this? There are a couple different ways to do that. Mainly right now, especially with the pandemic, we're limited to virtual. But there are a couple of ways we can do this. We can do a play-by-post or a forum RPG. You can do this on different forums. They're endless out there, so many different forums. Or you can do it over Discord. Discord's nice because you can do different channels, different sections for different scenes, character information, keep everything in one place. I like using Discord a lot. But there are dedicated forums that you can use to do that as well. And that's something you just have to decide with with the people you're playing with. The benefit to a forum RPG or play-by-post is very flexible. You don't have to actually meet. So especially for players that have hard schedules, you don't have to meet at any given time. You just post as you can. One kind of tough thing with that, though, is making sure that you don't steamroll the chat. Because not everybody's going to have time to post at the same time. So you have to kind of keep in mind that somebody might want to chime in, but they're busy, they can't. So you just have to kind of keep that in mind. Not a big deal. Just kind of keep that. Talk with your other players. Set up some ground rules. I know one of the games I'm in, if there's something that we want to respond to, but we're too busy at the time, we'll just type in there and say, busy, we'll post later. And that, lets everybody know, hold off for a minute. Somebody wants to type something, but they can't at the moment. Works fine. Next is tabletop. My favorite way to play is just in person as a tabletop. obviously right now, not really a thing that we can do just yet, but hopefully we're getting very, very, very close. So for right now, safe ways to do this, we can do Roll20.net or Tabletop Simulator. The nice thing about Roll20.net is it's free to sign up for. You can pay for an account for more options and things, more utility, but everybody can play for free. Or your DM can sign up for a paid account and everybody else can play for free. So there's options there. Tabletop Simulator is very cool because it's kind of like VR chat actually. You have like a virtual tabletop and you can roll on there. You all sit around it. You can also play different board games and things like that. The only kind of downside of that one is it is paid and everyone has to pay for that program, has to buy the program. So it's a little more expensive. Plus, you have to buy the board games to use in the rule sets, board games, and things to use in tabletops. There's a little bit more as far as cost there, and a little bit more in setup. Whereas VR or Roll20.net is less pretty, but it's free. And then once we are able to actually like get back together, and some places are still doing these, with proper social distancing and everything, but comic shops are a great place to meet and have a session, or even to find people that are also wanting to play. If you want to do like live games with people that you don't necessarily know, so it's a good way to find games that are getting set up. Now, here's where I kind of talk to myself a little bit. There's one more way to do this, isn't there? No. So, LARPing. LARPing is kind of the redheaded stepchild of role-playing. Some people find it a little strange, a little weird, but hey, that's what we're here for, right? We're all weird. I LARP. I love LARPing. I really hope to do it again someday. Because obviously, we've had had a hard time lately. But LARPing is a lot of fun. It's a great way to do things socially. If you can find a group that plays in your area, there are a lot around. Obviously, you have to buy costuming and foam weapons and things. A lot of people have stuff they can lend. So if you wanted to try it, you can, borrow a sword and a tunic before you actually, buy things. But I love to LARP. I think it's a lot of fun. Oh, I love it. In fact, here is getting a little late on time here, so I won't go too much into this. But here's my character. The one thing to kind of, if you want to get into LARPing, if you find a group and you want to get into it, one of the big things to remember, so one of the things that kind of intimidates some people is, thinking like, oh, I have to have all of this kit immediately. You don't. You can borrow things. You can make them as you go. So here's like the very first version of Kadir when I was still trying to figure things out. It's not very good. So that somehow got worse. That's a little bit better. And that's the most recent version. So as I kind of went along, I picked up new elements to add to my kit. I figured out better ways to do costuming. And it's not something you have to do all at once. You can build as you go. Don't think that you have to have everything at square one. Now, also one thing to think about with LARPing, most of it is actually live action, so you are fighting with the foam weapons. I mean, they're not too heavy, but you are actually fighting. So, if you're someone that doesn't like to get hit, doesn't like to be touched, definitely a consideration. I some of the snaps said, careful if you I specifically built this to take hits. In fact, I've got the head right here. He has broken several times. I've had to fix him many times, but I built him to take hits. I wouldn't use a $3,000 convention grade fursuit to do this. it would probably get torn up. So you have to be very careful. Most people, like, some people wear half masks, so it like covers the top of their head down to about their nose. In fact, Shitani, the king cheetah from last night, the person that made hers, Magpie Bones, does some really fantastic half masks that give a great illusion, but also allow you to breathe. I went with the full head because I'm a masochist, and I thought it was cool. But anyway, let's keep going. So there are literally endless worlds out there, just ready and waiting to have people play in them. Just have to figure out how. It's not that hard. A couple resources really quickly before we go. Have drivethrurpg.com. They have PDF copies of basically everything ever published, so you can find those and purchase the PDFs. But especially if you don't want, like, it's less expensive to buy the PDFs than the physical books. Sometimes it's nice to have a physical book, but they get expensive, and sometimes they're hard to find because they're out of print. But DriveThruRPG is a great resource there. RPG.net has a lot of resources as far as like game reviews, so if you want to learn more about a system. And then YouTube is a great resource. There are a lot of people out there playing games on YouTube. If you want to watch an episode of an actual play, just kind of get the feeling for how the rules work in practice, great to do. So a couple question answers. We can do just a few because we're kind of went a little longer than I thought it would. But so if anybody has any questions, I see Pirate. Yes, yes, I do. I've been LARPing for about 6 years now. I have, well, I guess more like 5 years since we lost a year there. But it is, Mary, yes, sometimes it's called SCA Light. There are many different types of LARPs out there. There are LARPs that are more like SCA. SCA, if anybody doesn't know, it's Society for Creative Anachronism, where they actually get dressed up in full armor. It's not costume armor. It's actually real, and they usually go with rattan swords or some kind of wooden, something like that. It's very heavy hitting, and it's not, you're gonna get beat up a little bit. Like it's not pretend. It's less on the roleplay side. SCA, there is some roleplay involved, but it's not quite as much there. A lot, and it's definitely more realistically based. Most LARPs are more fantasy based, and they're lighter hit. So foam swords that aren't going to really hurt too much. Like, if it gets cold, it might sting a little bit. But you're not really swinging for the fences. You're not doing like a baseball bat swing with that. Let's keep going. Yep, there are competitions there. That is very true. I have not played in anything like that, but there are though. Online MUDs, Razzie asks. MUDs can be a great way to do this as well. A lot of time, it's definitely more text-based. It's more kind of drop in and out. Or if you have an old, what was it called? Where it's like you have an icon, a character that you move through the MUD, but it's like all text-based. Old school stuff, very old school, but it's really neat. Let's see. Pirate, yes, there is a lot of crafting. Like, if I can slide over a little bit. So a friend of mine made this sword and axe out of closed cell foam and Plastidip. This is a leather baldric that I made out of scrap leather from like the hobby store, but just cut it to shape and stitch it together so I can drape that over my shoulder, and this I goes over the shoulder, and then that hangs down by my side so I can put my sword through it. Yep. If somebody wants to do it during high school but they're busy and never done it before, what is your advice? So, for LARPing or for role-playing? Yeah, LARPing, I guess. For LARPing, there are ways to do this. a lot of LARPs require you to be 18 unless you have an adult present, because there are adult things that go on at LARPs. It's fighting, so you don't want. There's a lot of liability there. So it's a little bit more difficult if you're 18 and you don't have someone that's there to act as your guardian, like a parent or older sibling or a friend that's older. But there are ways. There are options. Pathfinder system, absolutely. I love Pathfinder. It's definitely more rules intensive. There's a lot more rules there, but you can take any race. There are plenty of races already in Pathfinder that are like catfolk, gnolls, that are already basically anthros. Or you can take anything and house rule it. Like you can be a gnome that you reskin as a newt if you wanted to. You do whatever you want. I think probably need to wrap up. So we got a little bit long there, but need to wrap up and get done with this. Any last questions? And Pirate, yes, there are people that go to LARPs and just craft and bend and trade and do things that are not combatants. That is an option. There's a LARP in the Raleigh area called Lands of Exile where a lot of people do that. And they make a decent little buck on the side doing that. Yeah. What advice do you have for dealing with social anxiety when moving to tabletop play? That's a tough one. The big advice I could have with that is make sure that you're dealing with people that you're comfortable with. Try to get with a like a group of friends, people that you know well. For your first experience. And for that one, I would probably say have a very good idea of your character before you go in, just to kind of take your brain out of the situation a little bit, so you have an idea of how your character would respond, and from there you just kind of try to inhabit that skin as much as you can, and be fine with not doing well the first time. Like, that's the biggest advice I could give you. You know, if it doesn't go well the first time, do it again. Still doesn't go well, do it again. Now, obviously, if it just keeps going, it's causing you stress, that's a different thing. But be prepared that it might not feel great the first time, especially if you have bad social anxiety. But try it again. Try to keep going in that character. Try to really like separate yourself from the character and be that person for an hour, and see how it goes. But biggest thing, definitely have people that you're comfortable with doing that with. Yeah, and yeah, like Mary said, definitely let your other members know. Let them know where your limits are. So have a very candid, honest discussion about where you will go and where you cannot go. That's probably as much as important as anything else. Having just established limits, because you are role-playing. It's not personal, but sometimes it is. So sometimes something happens that you just personally have trouble with. I think that's really all of our time, unless anybody has one quick last question. All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you, everyone, for coming out and joining. There we go. Going back to the. Thank you for everyone for coming out and joining me with this, talking about role-playing. Had a great time. I hope everybody enjoys the Deep Rock Galactics next. Bye-bye.